I always knew my sister Amber had a way of charming people. She was the golden child, the one who got straight A's, who played piano at every holiday dinner, who never failed to smile sweetly in front of guests. But I never imagined she'd be the kind of person who would steal everything, literally everything, when our grandfather passed away. Grandpa Joe had always been the glue that held our family together. While my parents were off working late or arguing about money, Grandpa was the one who made sure I had warm meals, helped with homework, and taught me how to fix things around the house. He used to joke, "Emma, you've got the brains and the heart. Never let anyone make you feel less than." But if you asked my sister, Grandpa spoiled me. I always brushed it off as harmless sibling rivalry. That was until the day we gathered for the reading of his will. We were in Grandpa's lawyer's office, an old, creaky building downtown that smelled like wood polish and old paper. I sat beside my mom, heart pounding, still grieving, still not believing he was really gone. Amber strolled in late, of course, wearing designer sunglasses and sipping overpriced iced coffee like she was heading to a fashion shoot, not her grandfather's will reading. Mr. Carver, Grandpa's lawyer, cleared his throat and began reading. "To my granddaughter Amber," he said, "I leave the house, all financial assets, and my personal collection of rare watches." My jaw dropped. "What?" Mr. Carver continued. "To my granddaughter Emma, I leave my workshop tools, the old telescope, and a letter." That was it. No trust fund, no savings, not even his old car. Just some tools and a dusty telescope? Amber turned and smirked at me like she'd just won a prize. My mom gasped, clearly as shocked as I was. I didn't say a word. My throat tightened as I tried to hold back tears. I had no idea what had happened. Grandpa and I had always been so close. It didn't make sense. Amber, on the other hand, looked thrilled. "Well, I guess Grandpa knew who really appreciated fine things," she said with a fake laugh that made me want to scream. What no one knew, what even I didn't know yet, was that Grandpa had left me something far more valuable than a house or a bank account. Something that would change everything. And that Amber's victory? Well, let's just say karma has a funny way of showing up uninvited. I barely remember the drive home from the lawyer's office. My mind was spinning, my heart heavy. The woman who'd spent her life trying to one-up me had just been handed everything by the man who meant the world to me. Or so it seemed. Back at my tiny apartment, I opened the plain envelope Mr. Carver had handed me after the will reading. Inside was a single handwritten note on Grandpa's stationery. I recognized his neat, slanted cursive immediately. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I'm sorry for that. But I need you to trust me now more than ever. There are things that won't make sense to you, yet. I couldn't put everything in the official will. There are people watching, people I didn't trust. What I left you isn't measured in dollars. Go to the workshop, look under the floorboards behind the old telescope. You'll find the rest of the truth there. Love you always, Grandpa." I stared at the letter for a long time, unsure whether I was more confused, angry, or heartbroken. What did he mean, people watching? Why would he hide something from his own will? The next morning, I drove straight to Grandpa's old house. It was technically Amber's now, but she was out celebrating her inheritance on some beachside vacation. Typical. The workshop sat behind the house, dusty and untouched. The scent of motor oil and old wood hit me as I stepped inside, and for a moment, I could almost hear Grandpa's voice telling me to hand him a wrench. I walked to the telescope stand exactly where it had always been. That telescope had been our thing. We spent countless summer nights stargazing, naming constellations, and talking about the future. I knelt beside it and tapped on the wooden floor. After a few minutes, I found it, a loose plank. I pried it up and reached inside. There was a metal box, heavy, locked. Inside the lid, scratched into the metal, were the words, "Don't let them take what you've earned." I used an old tool to crack the latch. My breath caught when I saw what was inside. Folders stuffed with papers, envelopes filled with old photos and receipts, and, at the very bottom, a flash drive. I pulled out one of the papers. It was a deed. Not for the house, for something else. A piece of land in Colorado. 35 acres, signed over to Grandpa 15 years ago. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. Grandpa never mentioned owning land out west. The more I read, the more shocked I became. The land had been appraised recently for over $7 million. Oil reserves had been discovered on it. And based on the dates and documents, Grandpa had kept it hidden, even from our parents. And that wasn't all. There were emails printed out between Grandpa and a lawyer. In them, he mentioned being pressured by Amber and even our parents to make the will easier and just give everything to Amber, the successful one. But he refused. In one email, he wrote, "Emma's the one who took care of me when I got sick. She brought groceries, fixed the Wi-Fi, held my hand through chemo. She never asked for a thing. She's not flashy, but she's got heart, and I want her to have the land. I trust her to do something meaningful with it." Tears filled my eyes. I wasn't crazy. Grandpa did love me. He did believe in me. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop that night. It held video recordings, dated just 2 months before he passed. There he was, sitting in his recliner, looking tired but still sharp-eyed. "Hey, Emma," he said on camera, "just in case something happens, I want you to have this. I'm worried Amber and your parents might twist things. I've seen how they talk about money like it's everything, but it's not. People are what matter, and I know you'll remember that." There were tears streaming down my cheeks by the time I finished watching. I sat there in silence, clutching the drive, the papers, and the knowledge that Amber thought she'd won. But she had no idea what Grandpa had really left behind, and she definitely didn't know what was coming next. The next morning, I sat at my tiny kitchen table staring at the land deed, appraisal report, and video files on my laptop. It felt like holding a treasure map, but not for gold or jewels. This treasure was validation, truth, and justice. I called Mr. Carver, Grandpa's lawyer. "Mr. Carver, it's Emma. I found something in Grandpa's workshop, something big, a deed, to 35 acres in Colorado, and it's not in the will." There was a pause. "Ah," he said, a slow understanding blooming in his voice. "So he followed through with it after all." "What do you mean?" David suspected there'd be pressure to change his official will. He wanted to keep certain things private. That land was his ace in the hole. He told me if you found it, to help you legally claim ownership. "But is that even possible?" He chuckled. "Miss Williams, your grandfather may have been old-fashioned, but he was meticulous. The deed is valid. The property taxes have been paid up front for the next 10 years. All that's left is filing the transfer paperwork." My heart beat faster. "So it's mine?" "Yes, and I suggest doing it quickly before your sister catches wind." But of course, that didn't last long. Just 3 days later, Amber stormed into my apartment. Not called, not knocked, just burst in like she still owned the world. "You've been digging around Grandpa's things," she hissed, holding up her phone. "You went to the workshop. You found something." I stayed seated. "I found the truth." Her eyes narrowed. "The truth? Don't be dramatic." "I found the deed, to the land in Colorado, the one Grandpa never mentioned in the will, the one he meant for me." Amber's face went blank. I could see the wheels spinning in her head. "That land is worth millions, Emma. You don't know what to do with something like that. I can help. I'll cut you in. We can manage it together." I laughed bitterly. "You mean you want to take that too?" Her lips curled into that condescending smile I'd known since childhood. "You think this makes you special? You still live in a shoebox apartment. You drive a car that sounds like it's dying. You're a teacher. And you're someone who can't keep what she stole." I shot back, standing up. "This land wasn't meant for you. Grandpa knew who you were. He just didn't want to humiliate you in front of everyone at the will reading." Amber's composure cracked. "You don't have proof." I turned my laptop toward her and hit play. Grandpa's voice filled the room. "I want Emma to have the land. She's earned it, not because she's flashy, but because she has a good heart." Amber's face drained of color. You recorded him?" "I didn't," I said. "He recorded himself." She stepped back, her voice rising in desperation. "This will ruin me. My job, my image, everything. The whole town thinks I'm Grandpa's golden girl." I shrugged. "That's not my problem." And then came the moment I never expected. She begged. "Please, Emma, I messed up, but maybe we can split it. 50-50? I just bought a house and Scott's business is slow. You're what? Broke? She looked down, humiliated. That was all the answer I needed. For years, she'd made me feel less than, like my life choices weren't enough, that I was the disappointment. And yet here we were, me standing on something solid and her crumbling under the weight of her own greed. I'm sorry, Amber, I said, but karma doesn't do 50-50 deals. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard that a photo frame fell from the wall. And just like that, the past started to shift, not erase, but reshape. That same week, I filed the property transfer. Then I called a nonprofit land trust. We talked about converting part of the land into a nature education center, something Grandpa would have loved, a place where kids could learn about geology, ecology, and conservation. My students would have field trips there. His legacy would live on, not as a monument to wealth, but to purpose. As for Amber, the rumors started spreading. It turned out several of Grandpa's old friends had questions about the will, especially once the Colorado land hit the local paper. Granddaughter uncovers hidden fortune. Grandpa meant just for her, the headline read. Suddenly, Amber wasn't the golden girl anymore, and Grandpa's quiet voice, through his letters, videos, and careful planning, had spoken louder than she ever could. For weeks after the heated confrontation, silence fell between Melissa and me. No calls, no texts, just a cold, hollow distance that mirrored the emotional chasm that had grown between us. I focused on healing, physically from the stress, emotionally from the betrayal. Yet something in me refused to let it all go, not because I wanted revenge, but because Grandpa's memory deserved justice. One rainy afternoon, I stopped by the local library to return some books Grandpa and I used to read together. As I handed the novels to the clerk, she looked up and smiled. "Are you Mr. Harrison's granddaughter?" she asked. "Yes, I am," I replied cautiously. "You might want to take a look at this," she said, handing me an envelope. "He left it with us about a year ago, said to give it to you if you ever came in without him." My heart skipped. I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandpa and a small key. The letter read, "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and things may not have gone the way I hoped. I know your sister can be persuasive, and I worry about what may happen after I pass. This key belongs to a safety deposit box at Pinecrest Bank. If Melissa convinced me to change the will, just know I had a backup plan. I trust you'll do the right thing. Love always, Grandpa." I stood frozen in the library lobby, staring at his words, blinking through a blur of tears. He had known. Somehow he had seen what I couldn't and tried to protect me, even after death. The next morning, I drove to Pinecrest Bank. I was met by an elderly manager who recognized Grandpa's name immediately. After verifying my ID and presenting the key, he led me to a private room and brought in a medium-sized box. Inside were several documents: property deeds, stock certificates, and most surprising, a notarized letter addressed to Grandpa's attorney, dated just weeks before he passed away. The letter stated, "Dear Mr. Conway, in case of any future contestation regarding my estate, I request that these assets remain protected under Ellie's name. My decision to amend the public will in favor of Melissa was made under duress. These holdings are to be considered my true legacy. Sincerely, James Harrison." I couldn't believe it. Grandpa had never stopped believing in me. With these documents, I had the power to challenge the existing will, and not just in court, but publicly. With the help of a trusted attorney, I began the process. Word spread fast. Melissa was served with legal documents. She ignored them at first, assuming I was bluffing. But once she realized I had undeniable proof of undue influence and coercion, her confidence began to crack. 2 weeks later, she finally called me. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "You already know why," I said calmly. "You manipulated Grandpa in his last months. You shut me out, lied to the lawyer, and forged his signature. I'm just setting things right." There was a long silence on the line before she whispered, "You're not the same sister anymore." "You're right," I said. "I'm not." By the time the court date arrived, Melissa's reputation had already begun to fray. Friends she had charmed with her newfound wealth distanced themselves. Old colleagues refused to return her calls. She had become a social pariah, not because I had exposed her, but because her actions finally caught up to her. Karma, I realized, had a way of doing that. The courtroom was colder than I expected, both in temperature and atmosphere. Polished wood, marble floors, and a heavy silence filled the air, the kind of silence that only comes before something life-changing. Melissa sat at the defendant's table, her makeup perfect, her outfit designer. But beneath the expensive fabric and flawless curls, I could see the panic. Her confidence, once untouchable, had cracked. She knew she couldn't charm her way out of this. I sat across from her, heart pounding but steady. My attorney, Ms. Lewis, was a calm and commanding presence beside me. She had been a family lawyer for over 20 years, and she had seen cases like this before. But even she admitted that Melissa's deceit was unusually cold. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, entered and took her seat. "We're here to determine the validity of the Harrison estate's final distribution, as challenged by the plaintiff, Ellie Harrison," she announced. Melissa's lawyer began with the usual, citing the most recent will, arguing that Grandpa had willingly left everything to Melissa. But it was when Ms. Lewis stood to speak that the tide began to turn. "Your Honor," she said, handing a file to the court clerk, "we submit evidence that the will in question was signed under duress and does not reflect Mr. James Harrison's true intentions." The judge skimmed the document, raising an eyebrow. "What evidence do you have?" "Multiple pieces," Ms. Lewis said confidently. "We have a notarized letter from Mr. Harrison, dated 3 weeks before his passing, stating he was pressured to amend his will. We also have a video recording taken by Mr. Harrison's nurse, showing Melissa verbally berating her grandfather, threatening to move him to a facility if he didn't comply with her wishes." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Melissa turned pale. I hadn't watched the video before. I wasn't sure I could bear it. But hearing it described was enough. My sister, who had always hidden her cruelty behind a smile, had finally shown her true face, and Grandpa had been one step ahead. The judge requested the video to be played. On screen, Grandpa sat in his armchair, looking frail but alert. Melissa stood over him, her voice raised. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed. You want to leave your lab and little trust fund to Ellie? What has she done for you? You either change the will, or I swear I'll put you in a place where no one even remembers your name." The judge stopped the video. "That's enough," she said sharply, turning to Melissa. "Do you deny this was you?" Melissa, trembling, muttered, "I didn't mean it like that." "But you meant it?" The judge cut her off. "You used emotional manipulation to control an elderly man in his final months. And you expected the law to support your actions." Melissa's lawyer looked defeated. The judge continued, "Given the evidence, I find the current will to be invalid. The assets protected in the safety deposit box, along with Mr. Harrison's notarized statement, will stand. The estate will be divided according to Mr. Harrison's original wishes, equally between the two sisters." For a moment, everything stopped. I had expected a mix of emotions, relief, anger, sadness, but what I felt was peace, a deep, quiet peace. Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory. "Do what's right, even when it's hard." I had done that, and now justice had been served, but the judge wasn't done. "As for the conduct of Melissa Harrison," she added, "this court recommends an inquiry into elder abuse and financial coercion. I will be forwarding this case to the district attorney's office." Melissa's jaw dropped. "What? You can't do that." But the judge had already moved on. After the verdict, people approached me outside the courthouse. Former neighbors, friends of Grandpa's, even distant relatives. They all had stories, little things Melissa had said or done. Some had suspected. No one had dared speak. Until now. And now it was out there. As Melissa walked out, paparazzi were waiting. Someone had tipped off the media. She tried to shield her face, but the damage was done. Headlines would follow, so would consequences, real ones. Back at home that evening, I sat in Grandpa's study. I hadn't been able to go in there since he passed, but that day, I opened the door and sat in his old leather chair. On the desk was the photo of us from when I graduated, me in my cap and gown, him holding my hand with tears in his eyes. I smiled. Justice wasn't about punishing Melissa. It was about honoring him. And in that moment, I knew the story wasn't over, but the hardest part had passed. It had been 6 months since the courtroom verdict, since the truth shattered the polished image Melissa had built, and since I finally walked away from the shadows of comparison and into my own light. Life moved on, as it always does, but it moved differently now. I still taught high school science, still spent my evenings grading papers and planning lessons. But there was something new now, something Grandpa had always dreamed of, the James Harrison STEM Initiative. With the funds from the estate and guidance from some of Grandpa's former colleagues, I launched a foundation in his name dedicated to funding science education for underprivileged students. We started small: scholarships for graduating seniors, a weekend robotics club, and grants for local teachers who wanted to upgrade their classrooms. But word spread fast. Within months, companies began reaching out to partner. Alumni donated, community leaders stepped in to volunteer, and every single thing, every line of the mission statement, every science kit we delivered to a school was grounded in something Grandpa once said to me: "Knowledge doesn't belong to the wealthy, it belongs to the curious." I carried those words with me like a torch. As for Melissa, the fallout was messy as expected. The media had a field day with the story of a golden child caught exploiting her dying grandfather. She lost her job at the investment firm, and no other major company wanted the PR risk of hiring her. Her friends, mostly the networking kind, drifted away as soon as the headlines cooled. For the first time in her life, she wasn't adored or envied. She was alone. A few weeks ago, I got a letter, handwritten, from her. It was short, stiff. "I know I don't deserve anything. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." I didn't think it would go that far. I was scared. I thought if I didn't get everything, I'd be left with nothing. But I ended up with nothing anyway. "You were always better than me. I just never wanted to admit it." There was no return address, just her name at the bottom. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to rip it up. Another part, the part Grandpa would have nudged gently, folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness is complicated. I don't know if we'll ever truly speak again. I don't even know where she is now. But I hope, for her sake, she's somewhere quiet, somewhere real, somewhere she can finally stop performing and start living. I think Grandpa would have wanted that for her, too. One crisp Saturday morning, I stood in front of the newly finished James Harrison Learning Lab, built right on the same plot of land where Grandpa's old house used to be. It was a sleek, sun-filled space with glass walls, 3D printers, microscopes, and solar panels, exactly what he would have designed if he'd lived long enough to see it through. We held a small opening ceremony, just a few teachers, students, and close friends. I gave a short speech, talked about who Grandpa was, what he believed in, and how one man with a cluttered garage full of gears and books had lit a spark in me that would never go out. Afterward, I stayed behind, walked through the building slowly, touching the desks, glancing at the quote engraved on the front wall: "Feed the mind with wonder. The rest will follow." James Harrison. I stepped outside, breathing in the fall air when a small hand tugged at my jacket. "Miss Harrison," a voice said shyly, "will you be teaching classes here too?" It was one of my students, Miguel, a bright 7th grader who asked the best, weirdest questions. I smiled. "Maybe," I said. "Would you sign up if I did?" He nodded eagerly. "Heck yeah, you're the only teacher who makes science fun." That did it. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not out of sadness, but out of overwhelming gratitude. This, right here, was everything Grandpa had believed in. It was everything I believed in. We lost a good man, but his legacy? It was just getting started. Sometimes life takes from you things you thought were yours forever: a person, a place, a sense of fairness. And sometimes the ones closest to you disappoint you in ways you never saw coming. But in the end, the truth rises. The good holds strong. And karma finds its way. I didn't get everything in Grandpa's will, but I got the only thing that mattered: his belief in me. And now I get to pass that on. One student, one spark, one dream at a time.